Alright, the first part of yesterday's work, or actually yesterday's work in general, was just to make sure we could review some of the factoring work that we had done. Everything that we had done yesterday was something that we had seen in previous work. Today is where we kind of wrap it up and put everything together with something else different, which is the sum and difference of cubes. The only way to factor the sum or difference of cubes is to use the formula. There is no other way to do it. Unless you memorize the formula, you cannot do it. But again, the build of the formula is pretty simple once you understand it. And all you have to do is first off remember that your first parentheses is going to have just the letters as A and B, and the sign will stay the same. Your second parentheses is going to have three terms. The first term is going to be A squared. That's not going to be hard to remember. The second term is the first term in this is going to be A squared. The second term is going to be AB, and the third term is going to be B squared. Now here's the thing that we know about B squared. Anytime you multiply the second by itself, that is always going to be a plus. But the part where you've got to make sure you're careful is that this symbol will always be different than that symbol. So since that is positive, and since that is positive, that will be negative, and then that will always be positive. But again, it'll always be A plus B, A squared, AB, and B squared. You just got to make sure you flip that sign and always make this sign positive. On the second one, again, same thing. Start out with the parentheses being the same as the sign with the two letters, so it'll be A minus B, and again, same thing. It'll be A squared. This sign is always different. It's always AB in the middle, and it's always a positive B squared in the end. So again, it's not something that's super major. You just have to make sure that you're ready for getting that done the right way. Let me see if I can fix this focus and zoom real quick. Sorry to do this while you're watching. I know it just really helps your eyes out. But again, once you understand the formula, the next step is to substitute appropriately. So copy the couple examples that I have and then go to Math Excel. I know we did not get a lot of work and practice in yesterday, which is why I want to make sure this was more concise and to the point, so we could actually get some questions taken care of, since today is the last day we talk about factoring and tomorrow we move to something else. So what we're looking at here is two parts here that need to be factored. In order for this to be, first off, the first thing you probably should think of is difference of squares. So when we look at 27 and 125 and we put those two things into a fraction, hopefully it does exactly what I need it to do, which is you notice that the fraction does not change, so you can't factor anything out of that, which means that 27 is not a perfect square, because that's usually what we should think first. 125 is not a perfect square, but 27 is 3 times 3 times 3, or 3 to the third. 125 is 5 times 5 times 5, or 5 to the third. T to the 12th is something different. Now that's where you have to be careful, because remember, with your exponents you would multiply. So this would actually be t to the 4th, t to the 4th, t to the 4th, and this would actually just be u. And so what you have here is a problem where a is equal to 3t to the 4th. And again, whenever you do your problem here, it's smart to go ahead and identify your a and b. Again, 3 times 3 times 3, 27. T to the 4th 3 times is t to the 12th. B in this case is 5u, because again, 5 times 5 times 5 makes 125. U times u times u makes u to the third. You then must use the formula and do your a minus b times a squared plus ab plus b squared. You will then substitute. This becomes 3t to the 4th. I'm sorry, I did that wrong. 3t to the 4th minus 5u. Close it. Again, a minus b, parentheses, a squared. Now here's a key thing again to remember. If I am squaring it, I am squaring everything. So this would be 9 t to the 8th, because remember that t to the 4th squared is t to the 4th times t to the 4th. Plus t to the 16th wouldn't work, because t to the 16th plus t to the 4th is obviously not t to the 12th. 8 and 4 make 12, which is why that ends up there. Again, the sign here says plus. AB means multiply these two things. So all you have to do now is do 3 times 5, which is 15. T to the 4th u plus b squared, which means take this whole thing and square it, which is 25 u squared. That is the factor of this thing up here. And again, trust me when I say that if we multiplied this out, we'd see a whole lot of things canceling out. I'll probably do that later on in class, especially if you remind me. I can show it to you just to make sure you understand that this does actually flip back into this part, because there's a lot of negatives that pop up. I'm sorry, a lot of opposite pairs that pop up, leaving you with just a t squared, a t to the 12th and the u to the 3rd. But again, the bottom line here is making sure you know how to plug in your a's and b's into that formula. But again, a minus b, a squared, so square your 3 and double your exponent. A, b, so multiply your numbers, combine your exponents. B squared, which means, again, take your 5 and square it, take your u and, double it up that way. The second thing you're going to be asked to do in your homework is to solve a perfect square, or perfect cube. Sorry, sum or difference of cubes. And so again, the first thing you want to do is look and recognize that, again, yes, that is a perfect square, but that's not, because in this case, the number we're looking at is a is equal to x, because it's x times x times x, and b is equal to 4, because 4 times 4 times 4. And it will help you if you can kind of remember what some of the perfect cubes are, is 64. And so we'll do the a plus b times a squared, remember the sign changes, minus ab plus b squared equals 0, because remember that's going to be there still. And so we end up with x plus 4 times, that'll be x squared. That means multiply the 2, so minus 4x, and then plus 16 equals 0. Now one of these is nice, that is this one. We can see what the answer to that is, because that's going to be the answer of negative 4. So again, that's going to be easy to do. The problem is, when you look over here, there are no numbers that multiply to be 16 and add to be negative 4, because obviously if it was, then this wouldn't be the formula that it is. This, you're going to have to use a quadratic formula. And so we have to take this now off to the side and do my a equals, different a of course, because this is a quadratic formula, but in this case a equals 1, b equals negative 4, c equals 16, and we're going to do negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Never thought you'd go this deep into a problem, huh? Now we end up with negative 4 plus or minus square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 16 all over 2 times 1. Making sure I got that right. Negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c, which is right. We simplify that to be 4 plus or minus square root of whatever is there, so we have parentheses negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 16, which is negative 48. That's a beautiful thing, over 2. And again, now we have to simplify this. 48, if you remember the other stuff, because remember I told you about all the tools you have, notice how everything's kind of coming in together. 48, I believe, can be divided by 4. 48 divided by 4 means that there's a 4 in there with a 12, so that means 1 4 comes out, there's another 4 in that. 12 divided by 4 is 3, so you're talking about 48 being 4 times 3, which means that, remember, this turns into a 2 and that turns into a 2, which means it actually brings out a 4. So this actually simplifies to be, and feel free to bring it up to me at some point. I will break it down to you, but you need to have this skill down at that point, at some point. So I'm working through this just for the sake of your notes. But it would be 4 plus or minus 4i, because remember it was negative, root 3 all over 2. And now you can actually break it down, because both of these can be divided by 2 to be 2 plus or minus 2i root 3. And so when it asks you for your answers, you're going to have to give them 3 answers separated. It will probably have negative 4 as the answer, because remember that x plus 4 needs to be set equal to 0, and it's going to be negative 4. We know that from experience. Your second one is going to be 2 plus 2i root 3, and your third one is going to be 2 minus 2i root 3. And yes, that is a lot of work for 2 problems, or I'm sorry, for 1 problem, but again, that is why I said we needed to make sure we had our understanding down. It really gets interesting whenever you have a problem that you factor, because remember the factor completely problems, but you would factor it, and that would, one of your factors would become a perfect cube, and then you have to do this and go through the quadratic formula as well as solve everything else and then bring it all back. The key thing to remember here is that there is 1, 2, 3 answers, and that should happen because we have a 3 as our power. So whether or not, again, go ahead and go over to your Math XL and begin work on that. Be sure you ask about anything you don't understand so that I can try to help you get on track. Keep in mind, you've already proven you belong here. Now you must make sure you start working on your mastering your craft. So I am assuming that you're here to work, and please make sure you're doing your job, because otherwise I again assume that it's going to probably speed up pretty quickly for you, and you'll have to end up taking this class over. So let's not get bad habits. Make sure we stay on track. Again, enjoy yourselves and do the job, but just make sure you're taking care of business also. Thank you and good luck.